All right, we are back. Gary, welcome to episode 19 of the R5 Connection. Thanks everyone for joining us. As always, Dan Ritterman here. My good friend Gary Lozoff here from Tactics Real Estate Advisors. Gary, how was your Thanksgiving?
Great. And we're aging well at the R5 Connection, right?
I think so. I think we're hitting our stride. I'm feeling good 19 episodes in. We've got some new branding on the LinkedIn page. If you're not following us on LinkedIn, please do so at the R5 Connection. Check out our page. Help us reach 150 followers. We'll start live broadcasting from that page directly. We're very excited about it. Gary, let's
smiling.
jump right in.
I'm smiling because it's another calendar month turns over, and we have another epic story involving Post Brothers, Matt Pestronk.
I was going to say that Post Brothers
changing the world.
Yeah, we brought the story about Presidential Boulevard, about that apartment complex, Presidential City, about that sale a couple of weeks ago. And today, let's kick it right off, Gary. We're heading down to Atlantic City, down the AC Expressway. Why don't you lead it off here?
Yeah, look, there's been a process in place for some time on re-envisioning Bader Field. Bader Field was an early municipal airport. It's gone into disuse for over a decade. There have been a couple of different very large redevelopment proposals that stalled on that real estate. It's an extraordinary location. There's excellent water access. There's a lot of land. It's really well located in terms of off-island travel by car. And it's just the kind of spectacular redevelopment opportunity that beckons folks like Bart Blatstein and Matt Pestronk. So it's no surprise, particularly in light of Matt's group's recent exit from Presidential City, that he would take on another ridiculously underinvested asset with great locational attributes and re-envision it for folks like us. And that's exactly what they're proposing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're not familiar with this piece of land, but you go down to the beach to Atlantic City, Brigantine, or the Long Beach, Ventnor, Margate areas, this is the piece of land that's right off of exit 2 of the AC Expressway, kind of as you're going into Atlantic City. You may have seen a Fish or a Dave Matthews Band concert there on that site over the last few years. It's been really limited use. But so let's back up to what we're talking about here. So Bart Blatstein from Tower Investments and Matt Pestronk from Post Brothers, like we just discussed, have proposed a $3 billion city within a city concept that they're calling Casa Mar, which is a mixed-use development of 10,000 housing units and 400,000 square feet of office and retail space, along with 20 acres of parks, and really a full redevelopment of the entire area. And I think, I don't know who doesn't think this would be an unbelievable project if they can see it to fruition.
I think it's really exciting. There hasn't been a residential development of that scale that's happened in Atlantic County for decades. And with the proximity to the oceanfront, to the southern part of the Barrier Island, Longport, Margate, Ventnor, as well as to Atlantic City proper, it's just it's a spectacular generational project. And there's really no product that competes against it.
Well, I think that's the really, especially on the office side, I would say, which is really interesting. Yeah. I mean, we've both done some work for some clients down in Atlantic City, and there's been very little development on the office front. Stockton has done some development, and they've talked about building an office building. It hasn't happened yet. And if you really want Class A quality office space in Atlantic City, I don't want to say it's impossible to come by, but it's difficult to come by.
Yeah, and it really sort of conceives of a different future for businesses that want office locations in and around that barrier island. Again, it's product that doesn't exist on the island itself, and the office product doesn't exist anywhere off the island near there. So this is one of those field of dreams situations. I'm sure that the underwriting on the project is going to proceed based on what's going to happen on the residential side. And so, when this office space gets filled, and it will be filled, it's going to be the highest rent real estate in the county. and it's going to be a spectacular location from which to operate a business.
Absolutely. So as of right now, these are a proposal and a plan. Really good article in Philadelphia Magazine by Sandy Smith. So certainly worth checking out, and a story that we're going to continue bringing you updates on as they roll in.
Yeah. I mean, El Presidente, Matt Pestronk.
All right, let's bring it back to Philadelphia, Gary, right downtown to the sort of East Market area where we're talking about the new Philadelphia 76ers stadium that's been sort of discussed at length over the past 2 to 3 months after news sort of dropped that they were planning on at least exploring this as a realistic possibility. Members of neighborhood advocacy groups in the Chinatown area have started really voicing their concerns about what this means for them, especially in light of what it meant for the Chinatown located Washington, D.C. when they built that stadium down in the late 90s. It's a great article from Massarah Mikati from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Gary, tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
Yeah, I look, when you and I first talked about this story on an earlier episode of the R5, we connected the dots straight away to the development of what was known as the phone booth, the MCI Center in downtown Washington, which occurred and encroached on a lot of the Chinatown district of downtown Washington. This piece in the Inquirer tracks the efforts by folks in and around the Philadelphia's Chinatown to connect back to what has happened in the area in and around what was formerly known as Chinatown in Washington, D.C. And it was a really well-written piece. It was a balanced piece. And the story about the consequences of a development of the MCI Center were really were staggering for the immediate neighborhood. And of course it would be, right? The immediate neighborhood changed in a big way.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, anytime there's any development happening at all, there are always neighborhood groups that are getting involved, trying to advocate for the people who are currently living in the area. So it's no surprise. And like you said, we discussed this, how this might affect Chinatown. We talked about this before, but this article got into some really good specifics about what does that really mean for these people, right? And one of the first things that they talked about, which I thought was interesting, was what it means is rising real estate costs, most likely in the immediate areas surrounding the new development. And if you're a multi-generational landowner or homeowner, people may get priced out of that real estate that their family has potentially occupied for a great number of years. That was a really interesting.
And the idea that families could continue to remain in that immediate area in housing situations, whether rental or owned, that makes sense for a wide swath of the community is challenged by this.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think that the second one, which I thought was really interesting, was you're replacing essentially what is a mall right now, or at least is activated during the day, with a stadium that primarily is activated at night and has potential to sort of decimate the walking traffic during the day in and around these areas, which is something that a lot of these local businesses located in Chinatown really rely on, this daytime traffic, which might be affected.
And you know what, we've had a couple of years right now. We're now into year 3 of the COVID response. We've had a couple of years to observe impacts in Chinatown of what isn't happening, in the immediate area on Market East. And yes, daytime traffic is already depressed compared to what it was in 2019. And they're, properly concerned that, removing other uses that bring daytime traffic, daytime consumers, day workers into the area is going to create adverse impacts on their businesses.
Yeah, and I think that the final sort of point that it made was, and we talked about this when we first discussed building this stadium, is where are all these people going to park? And there's been a lot of discussion about public transportation access. And of course, this does have increased public transportation access from more lines, more ways to get there. But still, a lot of people drive to these games and they all have to park somewhere. And this kind of dovetails with the rising real estate costs, where all of a sudden you need some more surface parking lots. And where do those come from when you're building a new stadium right in the middle of the city? So there's just a lot of moving pieces that are going to affect the local neighborhoods. And this article really put a fine point on what some of those.
I also thought that the writer did a wonderful job of describing cultural differences in response to this proposal. And it is absolutely the case that folks who are living in Chinatown, working in Chinatown, and many of whom who are visiting there may respond differently verbally and otherwise than what we are used to as in the normal course of evaluating these real estate development ideas. I thought it was interesting. It's hard to comment any further on it other than to say that it was noted in that piece in a way that was respectful to the folks who were impacted in Chinatown.
Yeah, and I'll say this: David Edelman, who is sort of the front man for this project, I would say, for lack of a better word, wasn't necessarily dismissive of those concerns, but he sort of said, look, there's some positive and some negative whenever you do any of these projects, and you have to weigh them both on balance. And it's not that he dismissed them outright, but I don't know exactly how it weighs into the entire process.
Yeah, and I think the message from the piece, Rit, was that there's going to have to be a whole lot more of engagement and interest in meeting the leadership of Chinatown, both civically and economically, where they are, right? In order to get to a resolution that works for Market East, for the city, for the Sixers, for the Chinatown community, and frankly, like other really important touristic and business destinations in that immediate area, including the convention center and Reading Terminal Market.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were some quotes from the Reading Terminal Market saying they were very much in favor of it. Again, maybe for different reasons, but again, there's going to be different stakeholders who all have different opinions on how this should play out.
And you know what? You and I will have 5 different opinions on it.
I have many. I've only shared a couple.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get on to our third story. We're talking about Horsham, Pennsylvania, who's become I don't want to say unlikely, but maybe unlikely hotspot for life sciences activities in and around Philadelphia. Eric Reeders, the former CEO of NMS Labs, has announced the launch of the Center for Diagnostics Discovery. This is going to be a $12 million shared diagnostics incubator on Welsh Road in Horsham, occupying 50,000 square feet in what was previously occupied by Cigna, or a building right there on Welsh Road, about 3 blocks from my house. This was an article from John George in the Philadelphia Business Journal. They just joined Springhouse Innovation Park, located right in Horsham, some other very large companies like Janssen and Myonex. Gary, Horsham is winning right now in the life sciences race.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting stories about this is essentially the entrepreneurialism of the folks who own this building, who own NMS. There's another business that they're incubating there that's in the diagnostics field, and this is a group that sees itself at the center of entrepreneurial activity, and enterprise growth, serving the life sciences industry in that area. And they're not only talking the talk, but they're walking the walk. This is an NMS affiliate that is developing this diagnostics discovery center. It's going to be really interesting. I think that the founder points out that properly that diagnostics in some circles has gotten a bad name, and in part because of some bad actors who have
been in the news recently,
investors and others. But as a whole, diagnostics is a critical part of wellness and healthcare excellence, coming out of U.S. laboratories.
Yeah, reading this article and kind of thinking about it, it made me think about where Philadelphia kind of sits in the life cycle of a lot of these companies, right? We know Brandywine's had a lot of success with B Labs over at the Sears Center and filling this up with some of these sort of earlier startups with this shared, lab space. We see this development happening right here, which was sort of modeled off of the facility up in Doylestown at the Pennsylvania Biotechnology Center. So we've really seen a lot of traction with these earlier stage companies. I'm very interested to see what happens with some of these companies as they start to spin out of some of these things and start to grow. Because as we've discussed, it's not sort of limited on the large life sciences deal flow lately, or news about those deals recently. So this is sort of an interesting kind of way to feed.
Well, and I also like too, Rit, that this builds off of other activity in the immediate area that is oriented towards pharma and life sciences, not just at Springhouse and Innovation Park, but at other, tenanted buildings in and around Horsham. It creates real momentum, and the momentum builds on itself. I think, and the piece was interesting in that, they did reference the developers nod to Pennsylvania Biotechnology Center in Doylestown, and yet you and I know that the geography is very different up in Doylestown. It's a schlep from Horsham to Doylestown, and these folks properly recognize that there is a geography to all this, and there are different nodes of very substantial activity. And in Horsham, there was a hole in that donut, and they're investing to figure out whether there can be traction in filling a building like that up with folks who are in that space and need that kind of real estate earlier in their life cycle.
Absolutely.
We'll find out.
That project is already under construction, so it is happening. It'll be another thing for us to track. When I drive by it, I'll bring you updates on the R5 connection.
Okay.
All right, guys, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. This one is in the books. We'll be back soon for episode 20 before the end of the year, likely sometime next week. As you know, Gary and I are both real estate advisors at Tactics Real Estate Advisors. We exclusively represent tenants and helping them find real estate. So if you or someone you know are looking for real estate, please reach out to us on LinkedIn, or you can find us on the Tactics website. Thanks so much for joining us, Gary. We'll see you next time.
Rit, I just have one more thought, just audible on Horsham. The offering is literally unique. There is no other real estate inventory that will compete against this offering for companies who are looking for this kind of space in that submarket. And you and I both know very well there's some other companies that are very heavily invested in that submarket, and they're not doing that.
Well, I was going to say, and as we know, that space does exist, just not this kind of space. There is plenty of space in Horsham, market wide.
Yeah, and it's same old, or folks who own this real estate are taking an additional risk to nurture more better utilization, different utilization, potentially more revenue out of it by doing something that others are not there. Good on them. And sorry for disrupting your conclusion to our.
Yeah, you're really messing with my flow there, Gary. I don't know how I feel about that. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We'll see you soon for episode 20.
Take care.